Let's get after it. There you go.
Welcome to the Gold Medal Excellence Podcast. I'm your host, Alexander Payne, along with my co-host, Chris Asher. And today on the show, we're joined by Jeremy Fischer. Jeremy, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Start from the very beginning. You were born as Hosang Park in Seoul, South Korea, but you grew up in Ventura County, California. Talk to me more about your childhood, how you were born in South Korea and ended up in the United States.
So I was born in the 70s to a Korean woman and a serviceman who was an American serviceman. And I'm not sure like all the details on information, but basically I was put in an orphanage at a very young age. If you look, actually South Korea wasn't even a country till the early 80s. Mm-hmm. And so, kind of you could be persecuted and stuff, especially being like half Black, half Korean. They put me up for adoption, and I don't know who my father or my mother was, and so all I know is an orphanage, and I was pretty blessed that I had two. It's interesting. I had two white parents, Ann and Bob Fischer, and they couldn't have kids of their own, and so they kind of through a friend saw that there was a Korean adoption agency and adopted me at 3 from Seoul, South Korea, and I grew up in Camarillo, California. And so, it's just from the beginning, I've been pretty blessed to through every part of my life.
You primarily played basketball growing up. What other sports did you play?
Funny, soccer was actually my top sport. I mean, I got to go to Europe and play soccer at like 11, 12 years old. I think it was 12. I got to go play in England, and it was probably one of the better soccer players around. But it wasn't a popular sport. It just wasn't like cool to play. And I came up at the days where there was UNLV and there was Michael Jordan. And so, I wanted to be the next great basketball player. And so, at 8th grade, I could dunk at 5'10". But even though the doctor said I was supposed to be 6'2", 6'3", I was kind of like, okay, I could be, this great basketball player. And I stopped growing at 5'9". And so, so that's not conducive to be in the NBA. And, but I could always jump. And I love soccer, but it just wasn't popular. And kind of, I don't know. It was like I just had been done with that. And then I played basketball, and that was solid. But, track, it kind of, in 8th grade, I went out to a track meet and jumped 6'3", first time ever jumping. And then in high school, ended up having an unbelievable career. And I saw that's my future. And so it was really soccer, basketball, and then track, especially jumping.
Yeah, and that's how I kind of knew who you were. I was in Northridge at the time. They had at the time the LA Times had like sections for every area. So they had an Orange County section and a South Bay section. And so being a college student, the Valley section, they'd be talking about track athletes, and there you were. And it's like, who's this 9th grader and 10th grader like leading the state? Yeah,
and it was like, I remember it was John Ortega, and then
that was a guy. John Ortega was a big track. He covered the Valley.
Talk about unbelievable like coverage of track, and and for me, between like you had the LA Times, you had the
was the Valley News?
Yeah, was it the Daily News or whatever?
The Daily News, yes, you got it. The Daily News, that was in the Valley, yes.
And then my city, Camarillo, had a newspaper, and then Ventura County had this thing called Star Free Press. So we just got, really it was crazy because, in Camarillo now, everyone knows it for the outlets and stuff. But
yeah,
when I grew up, it was 20,000 people, a small community, kind of everybody knew everybody. And I had an unbelievable childhood. I mean, everyone knew my story, and I was pretty, a lot of people through the years really like look out for me, coaches. So basketball coaches, soccer coaches, my high school coach, Dennis Reedmiller. I mean, he really like went above and beyond and really set, precedence of like, okay, he wasn't just a coach. He was a mentor. He was a friend. He was a guardian. He was kind of like a second dad. And, but at the time too, all those newspapers just really like track. And I mean, I swear it was funny. My mom was always kind of joking that I was in the newspaper probably like once or twice a week for, track exploits or something like that. And it really gave, me a thing of like, I can do this. I can really do this at a high level. And this is my ticket to going to college because we didn't have a lot of money. And so I knew either I was going to go to Moore Park or Santa Barbara City College or something like that, and then go potentially to a 4-year university. But, being the top high jumper in the country, it gave me a scholarship and, just opened so many doors for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you went to Camarillo High School, as you said, also famous for just audience out there. Jessica Mendoza went to Camarillo High School, the same school as you. Did you go to high school with her?
Yeah, Jessica, I remember Jessica. So I think, gosh, she's maybe 2-3 years younger than me. And I remember her, I mean, literally talk about growing up. My high school girlfriend was on the softball team with her. And so, like, yeah, I knew the Mendozas. I mean, she was a good athlete. I mean, good basketball player, good, I think she played soccer too, and then became, unbelievable softball player. And so, I mean, but really, like, it was a time where there was some really good athletes. I mean, Marion Jones is 1 year older than me. And so Marion went to Rio Mesa, which is our rival high school, then transferred to Thousand Oaks. And so I got to sit there and, just follow Marion and, kind of be like, wow, this is amazing, and then, so, I mean, it was just a great time for Ventura County sports. And, yeah, I mean, I remember Jessica and unbelievable. And it's funny, we've kind of run into each other years later and we kind of just joke because, especially like her, she'll meet people that I know and I'll meet people that she knows and we'll talk about each other. And yeah, I mean, she's accomplished so much and, being, in baseball tonight, being all that stuff. It's just amazing to watch, someone from the city of my high school do such
it's where you say that because like Ventura County was hot at the time. My college roommate name was Matt Carrillo. He went to Northridge, but he went to Rio Mesa. Mm-hmm. And I remember he went to like UC Santa Barbara, and then he went to Moore Park, but he transferred to Northridge. He was my roommate. And he, at the time, we were at an American West Conference. This was before we got into it.
Wow.
But my roommate, Matt, was like a long jumper, 100 meter, 200 meter. And he was conference athlete of the year while we were at Northridge. But they had Angela Burnham, Alicia Burnham, Marion. You were out there. I mean, Ventura County was kind of hot, and like you said, it wasn't a lot of people out there.
Yeah, I mean, track general in Southern California when I was in high school, like I sit there and I look and it's like, I see the state meet and what kids, jumping and stuff like that. And it was like, I remember all these names. It was like, I forget his last name. I think it was Chase something from Quartz Hill. He was like 24 and like 50 and like jumped like 6'10". And I swear we had 6 guys jump over 7 feet just in Southern California. And that time it was terrible because it was like, you could jump 7 feet, but there was only 5 people being sent from the Masters meet to state. So we left some 7-footers and 6'10" people at home. And, Pat, what was Pat's name out of Redland?
Pat Johnson.
Pat Johnson.
We just interviewed Brian.
Yeah, he was battling Brian Howard, who was a year younger. And, Obi was a freshman and Michael Granville was, racing him. And so it was such a hot time for track and field. And it's crazy because, some of the state records have been broken. But I mean, I know you guys interviewed Michael, but it's like, a lot of those Southern California records still stand. I mean, I sat there, I'm still the highest jumper in Southern California. And it's 30 something years now, and, well, I don't want to, almost 30 years.
Yeah.
And so, but there's been great athletes. It was a hotbed of track and field. I mean, Meb Kefleski, I mean, that's him and I think battled for, like state athlete of the year. And it was just crazy. I mean, it was a crazy time of, great athletes that did, unbelievable things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you won CIF in the high jump in 1994. Then at the National Scholastic Indoor Championships, you jumped 7'4" at the Santa Barbara Easter Relays, which was second best for a Californian ever and 8th best nationwide. Talk more about your recruiting experience and what colleges were going after you.
I'll kind of talk about this too. It just kind of, it was kind of sad. Harvey Glantz just passed away, rest in peace. And Harvey was actually my coach on my first junior world team. And so Harvey literally just resonated so much with me. Like he sat there and he just, he won a gold medal when he was like a senior in high school. And he was just the most positive, like energetic, unbelievable person. And, I've been fortunate to still associate myself with him this many years later. And so I took a recruiting trip to Auburn because of Harvey. It's crazy to see like how track landscape is changed so much. At Auburn, the guy who picked me up was Greg Metcalf. He was the GM, and he drove me from Atlanta Airport to Auburn, which is like 2 hours away. And the jumps coach and the field event coach and assistant sprint coach was Coach Shaver, who's now the director of track and field at LSU, and that's the one who recruited me. And then Harvey was the head coach at Auburn. And, I took a trip there and I just really, Harvey just, inspired me to kind of go there. I took a trip to Wisconsin, Mark Napier, and that's where I ended up deciding to go. And they had the perfect mix of education and athletics because education was important. And, we were super successful. It was fourth at nationals while I was there, won the Triple Crown of the Big Ten, dominated the Big Ten while I was there. And years later, we were kind of the antithesis of the team that won the national championship because it was kind of a legacy that was built. And then I took a trip to Indiana, and it's funny, full circle. The high jump coach was James Lott, who was like a 7'8" high jumper. And I went there because I was like, oh, he's a high jumper. He would know me. He would know how to coach me. Indiana had a good, school academically. And then, after those 3 trips, I was just exhausted. And I just sat there and said, I took unofficial to UCLA. That was my dream school. And I'm not going to lie, UCLA was my dream school. That's where I wanted to go. I went to all the basketball games and, they gave you free tickets and stuff like that. And went to USC unofficially, Cal unofficially. And it just, through the process was exhausting and tiring. And it was really hard because the information isn't like it is today. I mean, you couldn't Google, like you literally I remember going into my, my high school library and looking up books for every school and seeing like, okay, this is what they're good at. This is what they're not good at. You had no idea coach wise, like there was no information on coaches. Like it was kind of like, if you're a great jumper, you went to Arkansas or Tennessee. If you were a great sprinter, you went to LSU or Texas, or UCLA. And it's just so different now because there's so many great coaches. There's so many great programs. And there's just so much more information. It's harder. I would hate the process now compared to when I was in high school. It was tiring. It was more phone calls and things like that. And my parents, they weren't athletes, so they had no guidance and help and stuff like that. And so it's things you learn, and stuff. And nothing against UCLA, but that was kind of my dream school. But in the end, I kind of wanted to get away, experience something different. And at the time, no offense, it was like they didn't have a full-time jumps coach. They had kind of a volunteer assistant. And that's kind of how they did it. And it was just, I was like, yeah, I'd love a full-time, high jump coach or jumps coach and stuff like that. So it's a lot different back then than it is now, for sure.
Let me say a couple of things on that. It's weird you say that. So a couple of things I've always, and you said it, because I always said on a lot of this podcast is about like educating the kids and the parents and recruits. And I want to give information, but you said it and I said it. I said every kid when I was coming up wanted to go to USC or UCLA, and you just solidified it, so. But there's other great schools. Number 2, I wanted to say we interviewed Brian Howard. So when you talked about Harvey Glantz, who just passed, that was his same thing. He said, I was on a World Junior team and Harvey was our coach. And, the relationship he built, and that took him to Auburn. One thing I want to ask about, because in your high school rivalry, you had a great high school career. There was a guy that came out the blue, and I always talked about this, Jeff Nadeau from Monroe. And you were the best guy. And if Monroe High School is in the valley off the freeway, north off.
Passed it many times.
A dirt track, grass. But I remember this guy out the blue one day, we talked about John Ortega. He's like, I think the year before he got like 4th or 5th at the state meet, just a good athlete, jumped 6'8". But out the blue, like at a high school league meeting or conference meet, he goes like 7'3", 7'4". Like, no one was supposed to beat you. And then this guy comes out the blue and kind of talk about that, because that was a short rivalry, but for that year, it went from like Jeremy Fischer to like, who's this Jeff Nadeau guy? And then he went to Arizona to play football.
Yeah, exactly. And that was kind of it. Like my junior year, it was like all my competition was national. In the state, there wasn't really like, there was 7-footers, but I had jumped 7'2".
Mm-hmm.
And, one thing about that I take pride in is I might be arguably one of the most consistent high jumpers ever in high school. I mean, I jumped over 7 feet, 28 different occasions, not jumping 7 feet, 7'2", 7'4", like 28 different competitions.
Yeah, like a dual meets and whatever.
Yeah. And so, I was a kind of a consistency, and I always kind of rose to the occasion to jump. And like I'm sitting there going, okay, I'm 7'2", I'm leading the state, I feel good. And then Jeff Nadeau, it was the LA City meet, and he jumped 7'2" ¼ to put a 1/4 inch on top of my thing. And it wasn't the fact that he jumped 7'2" ¼ He literally jumped like 20 times in the competition.
Yes, that was the big deal about the article.
Yeah,
and it wasn't a city meet. It was like at their Birmingham conference meet.
Exactly.
And I think John Ortega wrote he made like 6'10" or 7 feet on his third attempt.
Everyone. I mean, that's from 6'4" all the way to 7'2" ¼ He made it on his third attempt, and it was like, wow. Like, and I didn't know him. Like, I didn't know him from anybody, and I'm just like, okay, cool. Like, I never shied away from competition. I was like, okay, finally, like someone who was I was super excited. Like, I was just like, okay, someone's gonna push me, and I kept trying to jump 7'3", and it was like, now I got someone to really push me to get there. Yeah. And I mean, you probably remember this, but so we're ready for the state meet. I'm super excited, and it rained, and they canceled the meet or postponed the meet. Yes. And so like it kind of lost a little bit of its luster, and I was so ready to compete, and I was so excited. And then we didn't know if it was canceled or postponed or kind of whatever. And then like 2 weeks later, they say, okay, we're going to have the state meet now. Right. And I didn't do summer track or anything like that, but, I started summer basketball, so we were playing at the LA Watts games. Yeah. And because that was put after 92. And so it was like the first year of it, and we're at Dorsey High School, and I'm playing basketball, and I've already started like, we started playing 2 or 3 weekends before they finally said, hey, we're going to do the state meet and stuff like that. I think it was like 3 weeks later. And so I jumped good. I mean, I think I jumped 7'1", but Jeff jumped 7'2" and beat me, or he jumped I don't know. I think I jumped 7'1" or 7'2", one of those heights, and he ended up beating me. And I remember like being disappointed because I just thought, okay, the meet's going to be canceled. And it was just to kind of return myself into a track athlete when I started kind of playing basketball. And, it was fair and square. I'm not making excuses and stuff like that, but I would have been really excited to jump, like a couple weekends before against him, and stuff like that. And yeah, it was pretty amazing. And then, not to be disrespectful, my senior year, it was crazy. I mean, I had Art Lloyd at Rialto High School. I jumped.
Yes, Arthur Lloyd. He was a football guy.
He jumped 7'3". Yeah, and he ended up playing football in Nevada. And then there was, I don't even remember. There's another kid, I think, at like so somewhere at Orange County, jumped 7'2". There's a kid up in like up north, like Klamath Falls or something. He jumped like 7'2", and it was awesome. I was so excited about going to the state meet that year, because I was jumping well every meet. 7'4", jumped 7'3" at Mount Sac, jumped 7 feet at Arcadia, and I get to the state meet, and I'm early in the order, and I'm clean. I jumped 6'4", 6'8", 7 feet, whatever, and I couldn't believe I missed 3 times at 7'2". And I remember one of the kids, I forget the kid's name, maybe Wayne Roby, I think maybe his name or something, but he's got one more jump. And I have not won the California State meet. And, and I was jumping great that day, but for whatever reason, the bar wasn't staying on. He had one more jump. If he made that jump, I graduate without ever winning a state championship. I don't think I'd ever been so nervous in my entire life. He missed it, and I ended up kind of being this, state champ at 7 feet, but I definitely was expecting a lot more at that meet. And then, like 2 weeks later, I think I jumped 7.3 to win junior nationals and basically was over 7.5. And that's probably my biggest regret, is that I always was trying to go for the national record and I didn't jump the state record, because I really feel I could have jumped 7.5. But I was so greedy, I was trying to jump 7.6 or 7.5 3/4. And so, yeah, it was a fun time, because I remember all the names, and it's just amazing to see what the athletes did later in their career, like Brian Howard, and Pat Johnson had 8 or 9 year long career in the NFL.
Yeah.
He
was on the Super Bowl team.
Different. Marion, obviously, with her. I know she had a lot of stuff, but that's one of the most amazing high school athletes ever.
Yeah.
And then remember the 2 girls from Long Beach, Anina Haddad, and I forget the other girl, who always were finishing second and third.
Andrea Anderson and Mina Haddad.
Yeah. And so it was such a crazy. Scott Slover in the pole vault, I remember that, and then a whole bunch of distance people and stuff. But it was a really fun time, and to see the names over the years do different things and things like that. Meb, obviously, he's probably the most successful person from that class, without a doubt. There's no question.
You end up committing to the University of Wisconsin and you enroll in medical school. Talk more about what the transition was like moving to Wisconsin and studying medical school as an NCAA student athlete.
Academics was always first for, and this was, like Chris said, it was kind of about the students, but I would sit there and say, I love Wisconsin, helped shape me into who I am. And I had a great academic, career, did well there education wise, struggled a little athletically. I think that, as now that I write coaching education and do all that different kind of stuff, it was like, I always tell this story, the cold, all that kind of stuff, it never bothered me. None of that stuff ever kind of adapted, but it was the adaptation of my high school training to my college training. And basically in high school, it was like Monday, I might've done some long jump approach and some, sprinting. And then Tuesday, I remember jumping 7 feet in practice every Tuesday in my senior year. Wednesday, we wouldn't do much. Thursday, we may do some more approach work. And then, we'd have a league meet or something like that. And I would take I'd take 1 high jump, 1 long jump, and 1 triple jump to score points. We won our league, the Marmonte League back in the day, which had Westlake, Agora, Thousand Oaks, Simi Valley, Royal, Channel Islands, Newbury Park, Camarillo. And it was funny because even Moore Park was like a joke. I remember playing in basketball and beating by 70 points, or St. Bonnie's, they wouldn't even play us because I think 1 year we almost beat them by 100 or something like that. And now these schools are like powerhouses. It's absolutely crazy. And I remember Moore Park was a complete joke. It was like a funny school. And now these are unbelievable, beautiful tracks and great athletics. But I didn't do much in high school, and I had a work ethic. I worked hard. I had a job. I had a paper route from the age of 12 to I was 16. I had a job at a barbecue place when I was in high school. I had these random jobs during the summer. I remember working at a dude ranch and branding cattle and doing stuff like that to make money. I just found ways to hustle and make money, and mowed lawns, washed cars, everything we did back in the day. And, so I had a work ethic, but just track wise, my coach was smart. It was like, I never lifted a weight. It was just running and doing plyos and things like that. And I remember going to college, and I remember running I had a hard work ethic. I was one of the top recruits in out of high school, and I go to my first day of practice, and, we run out to the track 3/4 of a mile. And then we're out there, we're doing this 45-minute warm up, and I'm done. And I'm like, oh my God, that was quite the workout. And my coach goes, that was the warm up. I'm like, oh crap, I wasn't shying or afraid of the workout, but now that I know, I should have been transitioned into the training, and just going from never lifting a weight to, maybe an hour workout and playing basketball and stuff, to such an advanced training model. I struggled. It took me till my junior year to match my PBs. I PR'd in the long jump and obviously PR'd in the triple jump, but it took me till my junior year to PR again in the high jump. And I think just that transition is something that, high school athletes, and college coaches, by communicating and talking, need to be. It's not that you're afraid of working out. It's just making sure that you transition slowly into what you're trying to do. And some are coached unbelievable. There's some high school coaches that have unbelievable, training. But Chris, I mean, there was no what you and I do from a personal training standpoint, work with it, that what didn't exist when we were in.
It was very few. I remember a few guys have private coach. Like I do this now for a living, and you do it on the elite level of training center, but there was few private coaches, and I remember a couple guys that had them. The guys that had them were like clearly ahead of people. But you said something that I've said to many people. I said, in high school, you could race your way into shape or jump your way into shape because you have these dual meets. And I've coached at a high school recently too. Sometimes they'll have 2 dual meets on your week and an invitational on Saturday. And so you don't have to put in the work like that in high school because you can compete your way into shape. Then, like you said, you get to college, and now let's just say for indoor track, you might have 5 or 6 meets, but it's a 14, 15 meet season, so the training is so much harder. Like the work is done in practice. Yeah. Same thing, out in California, we might go from January to May with outdoors, but the Midwest schools or the East Coast schools, they may only have a 6 or 7 meet outdoor season because of the weather and transition. So it's a lot more training in college. And like you said, if you haven't done that, it's difficult because, like you said, in high school, I take a jump. You have so many meets, you're bound to perform.
I remember going to the outdoor conference meet and just being on fumes, like being like mentally and physically exhausted because of school and all, training and everything, and just being like, I qualified for the Olympic trials in '96 and I didn't go because I was just exhausted. I was so tired, and I was just like, I don't want to train for another month, in hindsight, I wish I would have, because it would have definitely helped me for 2000 when I definitely could have made the team. But I remember like, no, I'm done. Like, I don't want to, I finished at nationals and was like, nah, I'm good.
and it as an athlete, because you don't want to go to a meet like that. Exactly. I remember I had a really good athlete freshman, and he, he went to nationals with me at Cal LA and did way better than I thought as a freshman. And I said, hey, you want to go to juniors? And he was like, Coach, I'm done. Yeah. And I was like, you sure I can go to juniors? You can make the team? Like, Coach, I'm not running no faster. Like it was a long collegiate season for him.
Yeah.
And I respected it. And I was like, good. I don't want to take you and you don't make the final and I waste all this money. And he was like, Coach, I'm done.
Exactly. And so, I mean, I think it's like I always use the, euphemism or the example of like having, if you're high school, you're blue, and in college, you want to go to red. If the coach takes you to red right away, it's a disaster. But if they can take you to blue and make you kind of a shade of purple that's more bluish than red, and slowly move you on that color spectrum to finally eventually getting to the color you want, from red to blue or blue to red, I think that's where success lies. And so that was a lesson I learned, and it wasn't hard work. It wasn't anything. I mean, I had a paper route. I would get up I remember there was a girl, Monique Allegre, and she was a tennis player, and we would go, I'd run to her house, and then we would run to the high school about a mile, and we would do stadiums and throw med balls and stuff at like 6 a.m. And, she got a scholarship to go to tennis or tennis. And I got a scholarship to go, for track. And it was because we were friends, but it was like, we didn't have someone to train us. We just kind of made stuff up, and she might work with some tennis people and bring some stuff in and be like, hey, this is some med ball stuff I learned. I'm like, awesome. And here's, we'd run stadiums and do everything, because we both knew that our sports was our ticket to college moving forward.
Mm-hmm. You achieved All-American status at Wisconsin. Then in 2000, you got a phone call to attend the Olympic trials. Talk more about what that phone call was like, and it was like competing at that high level.
So, I was pretty fortunate. I was multi-time All-American. I finished second at NCAA's, runner-up, never won it. It was such a growth experience for me. I mean, in high school, it was like I was the dog. I won everything my senior year. I was undefeated. I was kind of the man. And anytime I needed to jump high, I did jump high. To go into college and being like, why am I struggling? Like, it was such a questioning everything and kind of all that kind of stuff. And there was a lot of growth from that my freshman year till I think I was just finished grad school. And so in 2000, I stuck around, was a grad assistant in Wisconsin, and was training for, the Olympics. It was kind of cool because I got to work with Jerry Schumacher, who was head of Bowerman and is now the director of track and field at Oregon. So we have a long history and relationship. And I stayed and trained and was helping cross country, helping track and field, doing all that. And I was like, okay, this is my last shot. I want to give myself an opportunity to train because after this, I want to, start coaching full time. And I didn't want, it wasn't supposed to be track. It was supposed to be, I was going to be a doctor. I mean, I wanted to go to med school. And, but I knew I couldn't go to med school and, try to train for the Olympics. And so I'm training, being a grad assistant, and they're just like, hey, come on out and help the track team. I fell in love with it. I'm like, I'm not going back I'm going to be a coach. I love it. Every day I love what I'm doing. And so, at the time, I'm a grad assistant, go to the Olympic trials. And it was such an eye-opening experience for me because I jumped 7.6 that year. I finished second indoors by jumping 7.5 and a quarter. I felt I was ready to make the team. And literally, I remember like the first attempt at 7.5 and a quarter, struggled a little bit earlier bars, but the first attempt 7.5 and a quarter, I'm over it and nick it off with my ankle. And if that bar stays on, I'm an Olympian. And it didn't stay on. And then the tall task was jumping the next one because even if, I knew it too, and I kind of got into my head, ended up missing that bar. And because I knew that the next bar, 232, would have to be a PR and all this kind of stuff. And I didn't even give myself an opportunity because I was just so in my head. And, so it was a great learning experience, but it really made me realize that I'd put so much into, competing and being that, trying to be an Olympian and trying to be that I lost sight of just balance in my life and things like that. And so I've always been academic and stuff like that. So, then that's where Chris and I paths, come together, because then I was actually asked to be just a grad assistant at Northridge and I was supposed to be training and get a grad assistant. And I get there and Coach McCauley and Stram basically not tricked me, but they were like, oh yeah, we're going to have you as a full-time assistant, getting paid like $2,000. It was crazy because I'm paying $8,000 for school and I got paid $10,000 and so I'm paying $8,000 for school and I made $2,000, not a month for the whole season.
We talked about this. That's what I told people I made my first year, $2,000.
Yeah, and even my last year at Wisconsin, I made nothing. I was working for free, but I was training and stuff and had access to facilities. But I literally was like, okay, $2,000, but I didn't care. I loved it, and it was like I'm 24, and some of the athletes I'm coaching are 23. Yeah. And I had an athlete, and I won't say her name, but she was difficult, and it was like. It taught me so much, though, about coaching and dealing with people and all those different kind of things. And it's crazy to see the coaching tree from Northridge. You got, Coach Asher, you got Stram, you got Glenn McAtee, you had Dale Cowper, you had Raina Ryder was there for a while, Jeff McCauley, Bobby Kersey, Art Venegas, Dan Lake,
Perkins,
Frazier, Coach Frazier. I mean, the coaching tree is absolutely ridiculous, and it's just an honor. I always have pride in my Northridge days because I learned so much, and Stram was such an amazing, head coach. Because I made mistakes, and if I was at let's say a LSU, my butt would have been fired for some of the stuff I did and the mistakes I made and the missteps I took. But Stram was like, oh, this is a teaching moment. This is how you learn. And this is really, I think it really was, and it was really the rise. And I think I taught people at Northridge something too, because I remember recruiting people at Northridge and they were like, why are you recruiting that person? It's a waste of time. And I started signing them, and so Jarek Holmes, he got his national championship taken away for weed, but we had 3 national champions in 6 years at Northridge. I mean, that's unbelievable. And, we started recruiting a better athlete and a different athlete. And we had great competition. I mean, Chris, you were at Fullerton, and we were always battling at the conference meet. Long Beach State, Andy and his group was always had great athletes. And you know, we had Utah State and Idaho who had, you know, put national champion
Yeah.
people on the team. And I mean, it was a dogfight at the Big West, you know, championships. And you know, we were able to win some and you know, really establish something and do something. And it was just the whole time from Olympic trials, you know, not making the team to then being a coach full time. It was just an unbelievable experience. And I know I went past what the question.
Oh yeah, no. I always tell people the same thing. I always say my funnest coaching experience for my whole career was when I was in the Big West. You know, even at Fullerton, like just going against Northridge, and Utah State was in a conference at the time, and Idaho. And I had good people, but we had world-class people in the conference.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. I mean,
I had like Brandon Campbell, who was a phenomenal superstar we interviewed, but then you guys had like people, you know, and we had it was a lot of back and forth battles, and we were all like just grinding, like in that conference.
Yeah,
like
but
we had to really work.
Respect. It was fun. It was like, you know, you saw him on the track, you saw him at, you know, at the thing, and the coolest thing about it, which has changed, is that we found diamonds in the rough.
Yes.
Like we would find kids that, you know, maybe only jump 22 feet, or girls who only, I mean, I had 5 girls jump over 20'6" on the same team at Northridge.
I remember,
you know, they were
like
all
in the long
probably
jump.
18 footers out of high school, you know.
I think at the conference meet one year, I was announcing it. I had went to Cal LA, and I remember, I think you guys went like 1 through 5 or 6 in a long jump.
Yeah,
you know, it was just like it was stacked. But you nailed it. You signed the diamonds in the rough. I remember one year I had a kid. He was a walk-on. He ran like 40 seconds in the 300 hurdles, which is, we were so bad. I just took him, and he ended up running like 51.4.
You know,
so his second year, this is a guy, he was a walk-on, a 40-second 300 hurdler. That's like, there's some girls that can run that now. But he ended up, you know, going to junior nationals, all that, and those are the guys you have to work with and find.
Yeah. And it was so much fun, because it was like, it was so prideful to take, you know, kids who they're like, where the hell did you find this kid? You know, and it was kind of like a badge of honor of like, dang, you like Jason Romero, you know, Ganesha High School. I mean, he jumped 7'2", 26, and, you know, 53. I mean, it's just like, you know, a little half white Hispanic kid, you know. And it's like, just, you know, on and on and on. And it was like, it was so much fun to find those kids, and they were good kids. That's the thing. I like, so, you know, even, you know, full circle, right? So I talk to Ian Jennings all the time.
Yeah.
He's coaching, I'm kind of mentor him, try to help him, you know, with some stuff. And it's just, you know, and I remember Ian used to battle my kid Rashad back in, you know, in the conference, you know.
Yeah, we had him at Fullerton, and we had another guy, Cody Jones, and they were walk-ons for us, because at the time we had like Brandon and another guy. We had like a 2 25-footers and another 24-footer, and we were deep, and it was like, you guys got to walk on. What I would love, you know, just piggybacking off what you would say, was going to meets like Mount Sac, and we would have these people that, you know, UCLA or maybe Wisconsin or Florida, they didn't even look at those guys. They're looking at guys that can walk in the door and win nationals or place. And we're developing these kids. You know, I remember going to meet in one year, and I had a heptathlete, and Jeanette Bolin said, because I found her, she was just 6 feet and slim. And me and Kendra Reimer were like, yo, let's offer her. And she didn't even have good marks. She was like Palisades High School. Her name was Takia Huntley. But I remember she ended up being one of our best athletes. But I remember going to junior nationals, and Jeanette Bolden was like, where did you find her? How come we don't know her? And I said, we saw her high jumping in Mount Sac, and she jumped like 5'4". You know, it wasn't even, it was like, UCLA wouldn't even look at that. But then a year later, she's at junior nationals, and it's like, how did we miss her? Like, you have to go look. You have to recruit. I always say this, you have to know how to evaluate talent. You have to trust your judgment, and you have to evaluate talent. You can't just look at a mark and say, okay, this guy's going to win nationals. Yeah.
And it was learning experience too. I remember this, I'll tell this story all the time. I remember like going to across the street, there was this little diner, right? Little burger place. I forget the name of it, from Northridge. And Art Venegas used to always go there, right? And at the time, Art Venegas is the director of track and field at UCLA. So Art, hey, Jeremy, you're doing a phenomenal job. Come on and sit with me, you know? And I'm sitting there and going, and he's like, man, you're doing a phenomenal job. You're getting these great athletes. And he's like, he's like, yeah, we're looking at this kid and this kid. And, I was just like, yeah, they jump far, but, they are what it is. And, and Art's like, well, what do you got? And I'm like, well, I got this kid, he's out of, the desert, and man, but he's got the body. He's like 6 feet, he's slim, fast. He's only jumped 46, but kid's going to jump 50 feet this year. I know it. I'm trying to sign him. Freaking, I swooped up and took him, and it was like Art was sitting there I thought, oh man, he's, this is Art Venegas, legendary. And, and I learned real quick. I was like, yeah, you got to shut your mouth, and stuff like that. And I remember just experiences like that where I just learned so much about the game and about coaching and stuff like that. So